What does it mean to be God? Is it about power, control, and how do gods actually bring salvation? When we look at Naruto, these questions quietly shape the entire story. Through characters like Kaguya, we start to see different ideas of what it means to be divine and how that divinity affects the world around them. One of my favorite things when looking at a story or even art is just to see the author's perspective. Kishimoto is influenced by Buddhism or even might be Buddhist himself, and we can see how he gives a wide critique on the idea of an almighty God for human salvation. I want to touch upon that later. A common criticism I hear is that Kaguya, an alien in a world of ninja, often feels out of place. This is a long-awaited deep dive into her character. I'll examine the major arguments against Kaguya, give my thoughts, and explore her origins, purpose, and conclusion to determine whether she truly fits in the themes and narrative of Naruto. Before we begin, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It helps a lot and lets me know you really enjoy this type of content.
Wrong, Madara. You are not the savior, nor is this the end of things.
Kaguya's origins are quite vague in Naruto, especially in the manga. The first mention of her appears in chapter 646, where Madara explains the contents of the Uchiha Stone tablet. According to the tablet, the divine tree bore fruit and Kaguya consumed it to bring an end to war. By doing so, she became the first person to wield chakra. From this limited information, Kaguya is initially portrayed as a benevolent deity who sought to stop conflict. Apart from the Uchiha tablet, we also get Hagoromo's direct perspective on Kaguya's origins. As Naruto receives guidance from Hagoromo, he explains a similar version to the tablet's account. Kaguya came from a distant land, consumed the divine tree fruit, gained immense power, and used it to dominate everything. However, he also reveals that humanity had to atone for the sins Kaguya left behind. Here the narrative shifts dramatically, from portraying Kaguya as a benevolent god to depicting her as a demon. The tone shift is interesting, but something to note here is that you could argue Zetsu's perception of Kaguya was that of a divine figure. It is Zetsu who wrote the tablet, even if it was meant to deceive Indra and his reincarnates. Since Zetsu is essentially an extension of Kaguya, his view likely reflects how she saw herself, not as a monster but as someone acting for the greater good. Hagoromo further explains that when someone acquires too much power, they eventually become consumed by it. This idea is crucial to understanding Kaguya's character and the broader themes of Naruto. The last major mention of Kaguya's origins that I can think of comes from one of the final conversations between Naruto and Hagoromo. In this scene, Hagoromo once again describes Kaguya as someone who was once a benevolent god, but he points out one key turning point: the moment she ate the chakra. That's when things started to shift. He frames this as the beginning of her descent into darkness, her transformation from a goddess-like figure into a demon. Also hints at something deeper, true nature of chakra itself in the Naruto universe, but we'll just save that topic for later into the video. Quick disclaimer though, this is basically the most we get from Kaguya's origin story in the manga. Zetsu briefly touches on similar themes, but it's still vague. Now, where the anime really steps in is with the filler. What I mean is that it takes the limited foundation from the manga and tries to expand on it, and I get it. The anime team wanted to give her more depth or even add more to her character, so they created a longer backstory, technically not canon, but it's still worth talking about. In the anime version, Kaguya is portrayed as a celestial princess who came to Earth from another world. She lands in the land of ancestor, and at first, she's shown as peaceful, almost divine. People revere her, especially because of her beauty and mysterious powers. Eventually, she's discovered by Tenji, the emperor of the land, and the two fall in love. This peaceful period shows her as passionate and protective, especially once she becomes pregnant with her sons Hagoromo and Hamura. But things spiral. After conflict breaks out and people try to seize her or harm her, Kaguya in desperation eats the chakra root from the god tree. It's a powerful moment because she doesn't do it out of greed, it's fear and survival. But once she does, everything changes. Her personality shifts, she becomes obsessed with power and control. This is when she begins using the infinite Tsukuyomi to dominate humanity, claiming it's to protect them from war. Then comes her transformation into the Rapid Goddess, a tyrant feared by all. The god tree eventually mutates into the Ten Tails, and it's Hagoromo and Hamura who rise up to stop their own mother, sealing her away. That's the myth that sets up the whole Naruto universe up to this point. What makes Kaguya particularly compelling is how she becomes a reflection of her environment and circumstances. Throughout Naruto, a recurring theme is that many antagonists are shaped, if not warped, by the world around them. Characters like Nagato, Obito, and even Madara are not just born villains, rather they are products of trauma, war, and loss. Kaguya fits into this pattern, but on a much grander mythological scale. Initially portrayed as a divine figure who sought peace, her descent begins not out of malice or ambition, but fear. In both both the manga and anime, she gained power, chakra in this sense, for the purpose of ending violence, yet ironically that same power begins to isolate her, distorts her intention, and ultimately erases the person she once was. The moment she consumes the chakra fruit becomes the turning point, not just for her, but for the entire world. What starts as a desire to protect turns into a compulsion to control, and that's where Kaguya becomes more than just a character. She becomes a symbol. Her story illustrates how overwhelming power, even when pursued for noble reasons, can corrupt one's identity and twist their perception. The more power she holds, the less human she becomes. In trying to stop conflict, she becomes a force of domination, enforcing peace not through compassion, but through fear. So while the manga keeps her descent minimal and vague, the anime tries to give Kaguya a tragic fall from grace story. It's not perfect, and some fans feel like it came too late in the series, but it does add a layer of complexity to her character. She's just not a final boss. She's a fallen mother figure who tries to control what she couldn't fully understand, which would be the God tree. Which ties into my next point. Kishimoto often pulls from mythology not just to borrow names or symbols, but to reshape those stories into something personal. He takes the outline of a legend and bends it to reflect his themes: power, isolation, and hatred. With Kaguya, he doesn't just retell the tale of the bamboo cutter, he reframes it. In the folk tale, Princess Kaguya is a celestial being sent to Earth as a kind of exile or test depending on the interpretation. Her time on Earth is filled with beauty, mystery, and longing. Despite being adored by many noblemen, commoners, and even the emperor, she never truly connects with anyone. She lives among humans, but she doesn't belong. Eventually, she's taken back to the moon against her will, leaving behind the people who grew to love her. Her departure is quiet, sorrowful, and symbolic of the separation between human and the divine. She leaves Earth purer than when she arrived, but she also leaves sorrow behind. In contrast, Kaguya Otsutsuki in Naruto flips that. She descends from the heavens not to conquer, but to heal a broken world. At first, she avoids conflict, she falls in love, protects life, and even becomes a mother. In a sense, she found somewhere to belong. But as war spreads and humanity turns on itself and eventually on her, something changes. In desperation, she eats the chakra fruit not to dominate, but to bring peace. Yet the very act is a start of her downfall. The key contrast here is the nature of their transformation. Folktale Kaguya leaves because Earth is not her home. She's too divine for its pain. Naruto's Kaguya stays because she believes she can fix it. But the more she tries to impose peace, the more she loses herself. The chakra that once symbolized unity becomes a tool for domination. What was meant to end conflict ends up creating a cycle of control and fear. And that reversal has meaning, that power, even when used with good intentions, can corrupt when it's forced onto others. Naruto's Kaguya doesn't fall from grace because she was evil. She falls because she tried to control what could only be healed through understanding. Chakra in her hands becomes the first link in a long chain of people trying to fix this quote-unquote world through domination. We see a clearer version of this in Neji's arc. He begins as a firm believer in fate, convinced that people's paths are fixed at birth, but Naruto challenges this head-on, embodying the belief that one can rewrite their future. The clash isn't just physical, it's ideological. Naruto's defiance against quote-unquote what's written stands in direct contrast to Kaguya's desire to enforce order from above. Kishimoto seems to argue that divinity, when imposed on humans, leads to disconnection and suffering. Kaguya becomes more of a cautionary tale. What happens when a god tries to rule rather than understand? In that sense, she's the inverse of Naruto, where she isolates through power, he connects through empathy. And maybe that's the real message. Godhood isn't what humanity needs. Humanity needs understanding, and that God above Earth is just way too disconnected for humans. Many misunderstand Naruto by thinking Naruto is a story just about ninjas, but from the very first episode we're introduced to a giant nine-tailed demon fox, clearly showing that this world blends ninja themes with deep mythology and fantasy. Naruto takes the foundation of a ninja concept and expands it using chakra, spirits, and even godlike beings to create a much larger world. Kage's presence just fits naturally into this evolution. The story was never strictly grounded in those traditional ninja lore. It was always a fictional world that allowed room for myth and magic. For those still skeptical, Obito clarifies in chapter 467 that Hagoromo sealed Kaguya into the moon. This moment confirms that Naruto world has always operated on a much larger cosmic scale, far beyond that of the shinobi world, so introducing an alien being like Kaguya isn't out of place, it's consistent with the story's internal logic.
Kaguya was different from anyone else I've ever fought against. It's like she didn't even have a heart at all.
I believe Kaguya represents what happens when someone tries to transcend the cycle of hatred through absolute control. She becomes disconnected from her humanity, and after their battle, Naruto reflects on how it felt like Kaguya didn't even have a heart. She was different from anyone he had faced before, too distant, too godlike to reason with. This is a reoccurring theme in Naruto. True peace only comes from understanding, not domination. The contrast between Naruto and Sasuke reflects this idea. Their contrast mirrors the divide between ninshu and ninjutsu. As Madara explained, explained, chakra was originally meant to connect people. Kaguramo, learning from Kage's mistakes, taught ninchu the art of using chakra to build bonds, but over time this was twisted into ninjutsu, a tool for war. That contrast even goes deeper. To use ninjutsu, you combine your own spiritual and physical energy, but ninchu was about connecting your energy with others. Sasuke, representing ninjutsu, found strength through isolation. Naruto represented ninju, growing stronger those bonds around him. Their rivalry, like the reincarnations of Ashura and Indra, symbolized the endless cycle of conflict caused by chakra itself. Kaguya used chakra to control, just like Indra. Kagurama tried to redefine it to bring people together, but even then humanity turned connection into conflict, proving how hard it is to truly escape hatred. What breaks a cycle of hatred isn't power or death, it's connection. Naruto chooses not to fight Sasuke to the end, but to reach out and understand him. That's how he ends conflicts, not with victory, but with unity. So I ask you a question: how can a god understand humans? Gods may begin the cycle, but only humans can end it. That's Kishimoto's point. A god, no matter how well-meaning, cannot save humanity because they are too detached. Salvation doesn't come from above, it comes from within us, from our ability to empathize and come together. Kishimoto never gives us a direct answer to ending hatred, but he points us towards one. In the pain arc, Naruto accepts that even if he can't find an answer, he'll never stop searching. Suffering, he learns, is what makes us human, and because we suffer, we can truly understand joy. The infinite Tsukiyomi promised a world without pain, but that meant abandoning the very thing that made people human. Only a god could live in that illusion. That's why Kaguya seemed heartless. She had left behind her humanity. Obito tried to escape pain too, but Naruto helped him realize that running from suffering means betraying the people that you love. Madara got even closer to becoming god, using the infinite Tsukiyomi to impose his version of peace, but even he couldn't erase his humanity. In the end, he was betrayed, ironically, by Black Zetsu, someone he thought was a part of himself, which shows how he betrayed his own ideals. Kaguya exists in the story to show what Madara could never become. She is what happens when someone fully abandons their human side. Kishimoto critiques both the idea of worshipping gods and becoming one yourself. He questions belief in a predetermined future controlled by a higher being. It ties back to the tale of the bamboo cutter, where Kaguya was too pure, too divine to live among humans. The same way Naruto's Kaguya was too disconnected to understand human pain, and that was where the true tragedy was. So what does chakra actually mean? Chakra is an interesting thing in Naruto. When everyone can have power, the temptation to dominate overshadows the desire to understand. Chakra amplifies whatever is inside the person using it. If you're isolated, it fuels that isolation into destructive strength, like with Sasuke. If you're filled with pain, it turns that pain into vengeance, like with Obito. But if you're open to connection, like Naruto, chakra becomes a thread that ties people together, just like what Hagurama initially intended it to be. In that way, chakra is neutral. It reflects the user's heart. But because people are flawed, chakra becomes the means which those flaws spread and increase. It's a mirror of humanity, full of potential, but just as easily corrupted. In real-world traditions like Hinduism and Buddhism, chakra refers to energy centers in the body, linked to emotions, awareness, and spiritual growth. It's not just about that raw power, but about actually balance. How we're supposed to balance that spiritual energy with this physical energy. It reflects the emotional or psychological turmoil. Just like in Naruto, this imbalance can lead to suffering. So the tragedy isn't just how chakra was used, it's about what it reveals, that even the best intentions can turn into suffering if the heart behind them loses its way, which is a big thing within Naruto, enduring, not giving up. Chakra gets weaponized, much like how in the real world, emotional energy, ambition, grief, or even love can be twisted by trauma, ego, or pain. Sasuke's hatred is like a blocked heart chakra, unable to trust or connect. His energy feeds into vengeance. Obito, on the other hand, mirrors a shattered crown chakra. Instead of enlightenment, he seeks control through illusion. Meanwhile, Naruto gradually opens each part of himself, learning empathy, forgiveness, and self-belief. His journey reflects real-world chakra healing. That's why in the end, the story isn't about stopping chakra, it's about choosing how to use it. To use it to dominate like a god, or to understand like a human. Kaguya isn't just the final boss, technically Sasuke is. She's a mirror of Naruto's deepest themes. Her story shows how the pursuit of peace, when rooted in fear and control, leads to disconnection and tragedy. Where Naruto builds bonds to understand others, Kaguya uses powers to force order, losing herself in the process. Her downfall warns us about the danger of abandoning the humanity for the illusion of perfection. And through her, Kishimoto reminds us, peace doesn't just come from power above, it comes from empathy, struggle, and the choice to connect to people around you. That's why Kaguya matters. If you guys watched up to the end, I really appreciate if you guys could like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys another time.